Researchers now believe that there's a kind of primal language going on. "I am death," the wolf says. "Are you ready to go?" And the victim, by its actions, says, "Yes, I am ready," or "No, you will not take me now."
Are you crazy? Is that your problem?
You know, I really thought I would have covered at least one LucasArts adventure game before October rolled around again. But here I am with a follow-up to last year's video on Sierra's Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers with a look at its sequel, The Beast Within. Sorry, Guybrush. I'll get back to finishing that Secret of Monkey Island script eventually.
Eventually.
Released on Christmas Eve 1995, because nothing gets me in the Christmas spirit quite like a supernatural murder mystery, The Beast Within, a Gabriel Knight mystery, or Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within, depending on when and where you bought it, takes the series into a brand new direction with the cutting-edge future of the industry.
Live action, full motion video!
By the way, I can see that both Steam and GOG label The Beast Within as having been released on June 30th of 95. The thing is that I can't find any info corroborating that date. What I did find is an old developer diary done by series creator Jane Jensen to promote Gabriel Knight 3, in which she cites GK2's Christmas release as contributing to its low sales. Considering she wrote this in '99, I'm pretty sure she wasn't mixing up The Beast Within's release date with the first game's December 17th, 1993 release. Due to being barely a year and some change old when this came out, I don't have much nostalgia for FMV games. Now, that doesn't mean I hate this style. If anything, I find it incredibly charming in an awkward sort of way. Sure, with the power of hindsight, it's obvious that this was never going to be the future of gaming when stacked up against the rapid advance of polygonal graphics. A point swiftly proven by the mid-90s with the glut of half-assed shovelware like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties on the market by then. But there were also plenty of whole-assed games made by talented developers either convinced that live-action footage incorporated into their games was the future, or doing the best they could to create something enjoyable for players in spite of the constraints put on them by the FMV craze. Because of this, I find that there's a sense of earnestness to the production when it comes to the good ones. Even if they had to render the movies at a tiny resolution, and many of them had to film periods of awkward silence to cover for the load times between cutscenes and gameplay.
Well, thanks for your offer. I may take you up on that.
There were developers out there trying to make lemonade out of this lemony gimmick. In fact, some whisper that a blessed few actually managed the feat of pushing beyond campy charm and into the realm of legitimately compelling stories. Those same whispers speak of The Beast Within as one such blessed FMV title. Cool, I'm starting with one of the best in this niche. I'm sure that won't backfire on me the next time I cover an FMV adventure. Continuing on from the events of the first game, Gabriel Knight is now a celebrated, best-selling author thanks to the novel he wrote based off of his experiences during the Voodoo Murders case. And all the while, Gabriel continues on his journey to become a true
Schattenjäger.
Sorry, I had to say it like that at least once. With all the German in this game, hamming up the pronunciation every time would get old after a while. Unless... No, you're right. I was never funny in the first place. While staying at his family's ancestral German castle in the hopes of finding some inspiration for his next book, Gabriel's struggle is interrupted by a group of villagers straight out of a Universal horror film who want a Schattenjäger to investigate a series of grisly murders in and around Munich that they believe to have been the work of a werewolf.
2 nights ago, his wife goes to the window of the house to call in their daughter, Tony. It is getting dark. The light outside is not so good, yeah? She sees Tony some meters away, playing in the grass. And she sees a wolf. It is huge. And it is moving towards the child. Mutter screams to the child, warning. And that is when the beast strikes.
Oh wow, we even went all in on the kid getting killed at the start. The Beast Within ain't fucking around. Though he doesn't buy into the werewolf talk, Gabe, you just dealt with a voodoo cult led by their long-dead priestess who has been possessing her descendants. Are werewolves really that far-fetched in comparison? We're not talking about a werecow here.
Moo! Moo!
Though he doesn't buy into the werewolf talk, Gabriel is convinced to look into the matter and sets off for Munich. And wanting to avoid getting his assistant Grace involved again, seeing as how she was nearly a human sacrifice last time, Gabriel taps the castle's caretaker Gerda to be his research assistant this time. Unfortunately for both of them, Grace is the jealous type who immediately assumes that a different sort of tapping is going on, which is a reasonable assumption to make with Gabriel, and hops on the first flight to Germany to find her not boyfriend. Yeah, they have one of those relationships. The kind that make you say, they're cute together in a toxic dumpster fire sort of way.
Ataru, you utter shit!
No! Shinobu! It's a lie!
You could resist it, could you, like a dog up somebody's leg? Come here!
To fit her more proactive role in the plot this time around, Grace has seen herself promoted all the way to playable in The Beast Within. Chapters will alternate between our two heroes, with Gabriel getting the odd-numbered chapters and Grace getting the even-numbered ones. Well, Gabriel does wind up playable in chapter spoilers, but someone's probably already mad at me for even saying that much. Gabriel's chapters center on him chasing down leads in Munich, while Grace's focus more on researching the history, both real and made up, behind the case. Essentially, her chapters wind up feeling like a natural extension of her role in the first game, which is a lot more compelling than you might initially assume. And it's not just the history nerd in me who thinks so.
The grown-up in me likes the prospect of fun, but the kid in me is suicidal over what a fat bastard I'll become.
The puzzles in these chapters felt more sensible to me than several chunks of Gabriel's side of the adventure, too. There, I wound up getting lost more than once because I couldn't figure out what my next objective even was. Like how I was supposed to intuit that I could enter this cuckoo clock store in Chapter 3 when I couldn't in Chapter 1. Or that once inside, I could buy this one specific clock right here. That's not to say I didn't struggle at points in Grace's chapters, but I've sucked at adventure games my entire life, and I've gained a sense for when it's that the game is being cryptic, and when it's just me being a complete dumbass. It's the difference between why didn't I think to do that, and why would I ever think to do that when I look up the solution in a guide. Needless to say, I wound up consulting a guide a lot here. Be sure to leave a comment letting me know that I'm a filthy casual for doing so. Please God, I'm desperate for engagement. A problem I had with both sides of the story, though, was with how inconsistent the screens are in drawing the player's eye to what they can interact with. Part of this can be chalked up to inexperience on my part, with my preferred brand of FMV games up to this point having been ones that use a mixture of live-action cutscenes and digitized sprites on top of a pre-rendered background for actual gameplay. So it was a bit of a challenge to figure out what was interactable without waving my mouse cursor all over the place. Can you tell what you're supposed to interact with here to advance the plot? If you guessed this patch of dirt right here, then congratulations, smartass, you've played this game before. Waving the cursor around isn't always a sure thing either with the new one-click interface. All of the verbs you'd need to pick between before clicking on something in the first game have been replaced with your cursor turning into this sword of interaction whenever you mouse over anything clickable. Not that you'll know for sure what Gabriel or Grace will do before you click.
Maybe something bad? Maybe something good?
Thankfully, this isn't one of those adventure games where you risk getting killed for clicking on the wrong thing in a seemingly innocuous scene. Unless I just got exceedingly lucky, the only times I died were pretty logical moments for there to be a risk of death. The real issue comes from times where you can't tell that there are two or more things to interact with in a given spot because their boundaries practically overlap. Strangely enough, after repeatedly clicking on the thing that my eye was drawn to failed to get results, it didn't occur to me to click on the tiny nondescript spot just below it. A spot small enough that it could be mistaken for a programming oversight on the size of an object's hitbox. And what really tweaks my third nipple is that this problem repeats itself at the forest's edge just one screen away. All of this real estate for Gabriel to make the same remark over and over again.
These woods go back a ways. Plenty of space to hide.
And then this teeny bit of grass I found by complete accident. On the bright side, it's far easier to discern what the game wants me to click on when I get these zoomed in shots. You can be a lot more obvious with it when you're not trying to smoothly transition between gameplay and cutscenes as best as mid-90s CD-based gaming would allow. I may not have played The Beast Within until this year, but I'm still old enough to be familiar with how much longer these pauses were prior to digital versions becoming the norm on PC. Unless you downloaded a crack to get past the copy protection check. I mean, what? I've never heard of such a thing before in my life. Oh, hey, look! Mike's on the scene to talk about the inventory changes. Thanks, Mike. I'm here by the inventory for The Beast Within, a Gabriel Knight mystery. And as you can see, not much has changed beyond the visual design. In this reporter's opinion, this is perfectly fine. Nod head yes. Not everything needs to be reinvented every time you make a sequel. However, we have seen a change with Gabriel's tape recorder over here. What was once merely a clever way to allow the player to listen to previous dialogue again, has seen the addition of a second tape slot, allowing the player to splice together dialogue. Despite the potential of such a feature, it sees all of one use early in the game and then never again. All in all, not much to write home about, but not much to deeply critique either. Back to you in the studio. Thank you, Mike, for that insightful bit of reporting. I'm just here so I won't get fined. And as always, a dated reference that only you find amusing. Now let's move on to the presentation. To start with, can I just say how impressive the compositing is in so many of these shots? In the cutscenes, I mean. The digitized sprites used during normal gameplay look hilariously out of place. Plenty of scenes were filmed entirely on a blue screen and then composited onto the static image used for the background. Back then, they didn't exactly have easy-to-use editing software that enables even a dweebus like me to put himself over the top of an image and have it look half-decent. It took more time to set this whole thing up than it did to edit into the video. It's not perfect, and I'm sure a full HD conversion would make the seams much more obvious, but it's done just well enough that I can suspend my disbelief and say, sure, I'll buy that that's where the character is. Which in terms of FMV games already puts this in the top 0.01 percentile. I mean, we're looking at a game that has two main characters with long hair, and there isn't tons of pixelated garbage floating around whenever they turn their heads. Now, I'll gladly admit that there's a large part of me that wishes they'd stuck with the gorgeous pixel art of the original Gabriel Knight. There was certainly more of a cinematic quality to many of its big scenes despite the limited animation, while The Beast Within feels closer to an episode of Murder, She Wrote in the way that it's shot. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Murder, She Wrote is great, and one of these days I'm going to force my family to play a game of Brindlewood Bay with me, but there's still a world of difference between it and theatrical releases when it comes to cinematography. Owing to its own format as an adventure game, dialogue in The Beast Within is mostly shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot.
Hey, we're getting in a rut!
Considering the technical limitations, I'm not sure what else they could have done. To this day, a lot of games struggle with making dialogue sequences more visually dynamic to the point that most of us likely don't even think about it when we're playing. It's actually the live-action footage itself that made this issue stand out to me. You want to play it being an interactive movie? Then I'm going to judge your cinematography like a proper film. For instance, the laughable day for night shots. I don't blame Grace's actress for not wanting to run around in the woods in the dark of night while wearing a pimped-out dress, but there had to be a more convincing way to shoot this. They managed it later on with Gabriel in the woods with
The smaller, remember! You can't forget!
So I don't know why they went the day for night route when that has never looked good in anything ever. Yet much like Murder, She Wrote, The Beast Within overcomes its workman-style cinematography with a campy charm and genuine performances from its leads.
You're an American.
That's right.
And you believe you have information about the mutilation killings?
I do have some information, yes, ma'am. I was about to discuss it with the commissar over there, but he seems kind of busy. I thought I'd speak with y'all instead.
Even if the dialogue volume can be so inconsistent from line to line, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I was the audio engineer. Going into this, I was highly skeptical of the choice to replace Tim Curry as Gabriel. Obviously, Curry wouldn't have worked out well as a live-action version of Gabriel to begin with, not unless they had access to a time machine and can get 1970s Tim Curry before he deliberately put on weight to escape harassment from obsessive Rocky Horror fans.
That's true. That's like 100%. Everything you said was true.
But he brought an endearing charm to the role in spite of his horrible attempt at a Nolans accent.
You know, you can go overboard with this improving yourself stuff. You don't want to alienate us mere mortals.
My expectations weren't helped by the fact that the only other credit for his replacement, Dean Erickson, was as a bit character in the first season of Frasier for Niles to be jealous of.
All right, what's he doing now? I believe he's bagging her beans.
And you know what? I was completely wrong. Erickson does a great job in the role and manages to harness the core of Curry's performance, that being Gabriel's weirdly likable smugness.
Here you go.
I see. Well, I must congratulate you. I had no idea. Your family owns Schloss Ritte in Rittersberg?
Why, yes. Yes, we do.
Gabriel Knight always thinks he's the most intelligent, handsome guy in the room, but he's never actively malicious about it. For all his attempts to be a self-centered egomaniac, Gabriel can never stop himself from trying to do the right thing. Eventually. Erickson's mastery of that smug grin will have you wavering between wanting to slap him upside the head and grinning to yourself over Gabriel just being Gabriel again. And props to Mr. Erickson for not even attempting a New Orleans accent and instead going for a more standard Southern accent that he could actually hang on to while speaking. Sorry, Tim. You know I love you.
They called me mad, insane, Wendell.
So yeah, it's an absolute mystery to me why Dean Erickson never had another acting gig after this, until he was announced as part of the voice cast for the upcoming adventure game A Rum Case in Fogtown. Which, after I got over my disappointment that it said Fogtown and not Frogtown, is definitely something I'd like to check out. Similar praise can be extended to Joanne Takahashi as Grace. In fact, with Grace having more to do than sit at a desk and be snarky for 9/10 of the game, it's Takahashi who gets to help define Grace outside of being Gabriel's assistant and part-time stalker. While there were writing decisions concerning Grace as a character that I didn't care for and will discuss later, none of that is the fault of her actress. Takahashi plays up Grace's acerbic side even more than Leah Remini did.
They just don't make men like that anymore. You would think so, wouldn't you?
Coming right up to the line of unlikable before pulling it back with a polite, considerate side when Grace is dealing with people who don't piss her off. The only one of the first game's main three heroes who hasn't been recast is Detective Mosley, because he doesn't appear at all here. No Mark Hamill for us today, sadly. He was too busy playing Maverick in the later Wing Commander games to make an appearance here. They found a most worthy replacement, though.
Commissar Lieber, so generous of you to see me.
Sit down, Mr. Knight. Now, you will tell me what you think you know about this case, yes?
Nicholas Worth, who you might recognize for being thrown out a window in Darkman, plays the stereotypically tight-laced, humorless German cop for all its He plays it really well. Though I highly doubt that accent is anywhere close to an actual Bavarian one.
How do you say, quid pro quo in German?
There is no translation.
But the same issue could be levied against most of the primarily American cast. Worth is clearly having a blast as Labor, the lead detective on the murder case whose last nerve was frayed the moment he had to exchange more than simple pleasantries with Gabriel Knight. Which is a pretty normal response.
All right, you have my attention. Now who are you?
His ham-tastic, absolutely done with Gabriel's shit attitude is in stark contrast with Mosley's soft-spoken, good old boy personality, but nonetheless forms a similarly entertaining double act with Gabriel.
Okay, let's try this. You haven't found the zoo wolves yet?
No.
Have you caught anything yet?
No.
Why am I not surprised?
And Labor's status as the best of the supporting cast is cemented with his cartoony theme song that fits Worth's scenery-chewing perfectly.
Criminal Commissar Lieber. I couldn't just call you KKL, could I?
Sit down!
Robert Holmes, who I utterly failed to credit for the music while praising Kelly and Richard Spurgeon's sound design in my video on the first game, returns to compose the main themes and the opera sections, which I'm assuming means that he was responsible for all of the major characters' themes and not just the opening and closing numbers. And I have to make this assumption because there's this non-descriptive additional music credit going to Victor Cruz, Brian Min, and Usher? Oh, that makes more sense. I really need to stop reading names from right to left. I would assume that this means they handled a few ambient background tracks or the like, but that uncertainty always makes me nervous in saying for sure who wrote what.
And what about Chuckles? Will he ever find the perfect curtains?
Whoever was responsible for it, the music is excellent at setting the right mood throughout the game, particularly in the moments when the Beast Within wears its classic gothic horror inspiration on its sleeve. And as for the opera bits, do I really seem cultured enough to critique opera? Exactly. So let's all just pretend I said something profound and move on to the story before I embarrass myself more than usual.
God damn it, I hate you.
Having two playable characters this time means that we have two parallel story lanes to cover. First, Gabriel's investigation into the murders themselves leads him to an exclusive hunting club led by the mysterious and charming Baron Friedrich von Glauer, played by Polish actor Peter J. Lucas, who I swear I've seen in something else even though I've never watched anything else IMDb says he's been in. Lucas does a fantastic job as the Beast Within's answer to Malia Getty. Instantly taken with Gabriel, von Glauer happily welcomes the boorish American who struggles with basic German.
Wen? Sie sind?
Sie, me, oh,
ja.
Into his club upon learning Gabriel descends from an esteemed bloodline like the Ritters.
You must tell me all about how you ended up in America, Herr Ritter. And about your hunting there. You are a hunter, are you not?
It's Knight now. Gabriel Knight. And yeah, I hunt. Absolutely.
Very good. Gabriel Knight. Gabriel, like the angel.
This goes down with the other members about as well as any other time that an American is welcomed into European high society. But his former favorite, Baron von Zell, is the most openly hostile to Gabriel.
I demand to know what you're doing at this club.
Me?
Baron von Zell. Really?
Are you aware that this guest of yours has been asking intimate questions? Poking around in our personal affairs? He must be a reporter. Or the police.
What do we have to fear from a reporter or the police? Although I can promise you, Herr Knight is neither.
You don't care that he's prying into our private business? What possible motive could he have?
Stop! Please. He's my guest. You're the one who's turning that into an inquisition.
Then it is on your head!
And if von Zell acting like a jilted lover didn't clue you in, von Glauer playing a similar role to Malia Getty does include tons of romantic undertones with Gabriel. Though this being from the mid-90s when any portrayal of male homosexuality was seen as scandalous, it never goes beyond subtext. From a purely storytelling perspective, it really is a shame that this never progresses from subtext to text. I don't think it's much of a spoiler when the story starts off mentioning werewolves and is called The Beast Within, to acknowledge that this is a story about werewolves, where the core conceit with sympathetic portrayals of them is about the battle for control over their animalistic nature. To me at least, that means a werewolf's relationship should be portrayed as more openly passionate and physical. Mysterious, well-dressed, handsome European man of vague origin who is a charming conversationalist and fixates on the protagonist. He may as well be the go-to example of an Anne Rice vampire. So in a way, giving our protagonist a case of the nut gaze, to the point of having some random blonde show up while he's hanging out with von Glauer so he has a vagina to stick it in, is to the detriment of the story and its themes. Not being enough to sabotage it, mind you, but I feel that it does keep the Beast Within from achieving its full narrative potential. That this subtext was completely intended is further confirmed in Grace's plotline as she digs into werewolf lore and Bavarian history in search of connections to Gabriel's case and winds up at King Ludwig II of Bavaria and his relationship with a man known as the Black Wolf. While the Black Wolf is fictional, Ludwig II was a very real 19th century monarch known for his adoration of myths, legends, and Wagner operas, whose sexuality has often been speculated on by historians due to his numerous romantic friendships with other men. That may make it seem pretty cut and dry, but Ludwig was the kind of man who was not fond of the real world and preferred to be alone with his escapism. What? It's entirely plausible that his attraction to them had nothing to do with gender or even these men as people, and was instead built entirely on their resemblance to figures in the chivalric tales he adored so much. The Beast Within opts to treat Ludwig's homosexuality as historical fact, and uses a mixture of real history and fictionalized accounts to tie Ludwig's later years into its supernatural horror narrative. And similar to the first game's treatment of voodoo, it does so in a far more tasteful and sympathetic way than you might expect in a game from this time. Most notably with Joseph Dahlmeyer, the historian Grace consults about Ludwig, who is there to info-dump the player with all of the important details about the king. He paints the tragic picture of a lonely man who never fit in with society and whose personal struggles were seen as proof of his insanity. However, the matter of Ludwig being into men is treated almost as an afterthought in regard to this, with Dahlmeyer quickly dismissing the idea that Ludwig's struggles had anything to do with his sexuality, all the while subtly implying that at least part of his sympathy for Ludwig and the ostracism he suffered stems from Dahlmeyer's own experiences as a gay man living in the highly Catholic Bavaria.
Sounds like you can relate.
Me? Hell, I have it easy. At least I live in the 1990s, and not every eye in the country is on me. But yes, I can relate.
Though that last part is more down to personal interpretation of what he meant in response to Grace's observation. I can't exactly comment on how well it's aged in terms of representation, what with being a straight guy who was raised in cowboy country, but I do think this helped chip away at the game industry's hesitancy towards more overt LGBTQ elements. If only a similar kind of nuance could have been spared in writing for Grace.
All right. Look, let's just drop all the pretense, okay? Obviously, I found the passageway. I know what's been going on in this little Alpinian love nest, and really, I couldn't care less. If you want to screw around with your employer, that's none of my business. But what I won't put up with is assisting the Schattenjäger crap. I gave up school to work on this stuff because I thought it was important. I'm doing the research that Gabriel wanted, and so help me, I'm gonna be doing more than just research this time around. And I'm not gonna sit around and wait for him to call and give me permission. And if you don't like it, it's just too damn bad!
Okay, fine. You do the damn research.
I'm just gonna say it flat out. In her first chapter and until about halfway through the next one, Grace comes off as a raging psycho towards poor Gerda, taking all of her anger towards Gabriel out on a completely innocent woman because Grace assumes that the two of them must be fooling around. Perhaps this would be a bit more understandable, though still not excusable, if Grace and Gabriel were actually a thing. But nothing in The Beast Within ever indicates that they graduated to the they did stage of their will they won't they relationship. Gerda does absolutely nothing to her, and even lets Grace stay at the castle when she would have been entirely within her rights to tell her to leave. And all Grace does in return is attack her for a day and a half. It's obnoxious enough that I can only imagine how many players put the game down after Chapter 2 and never went back. Mercifully, this plot point is put out of its misery halfway through Chapter 4 when Grace finally grasped that Gerda had been in love with Wolfgang, not Gabriel. After realizing what an ass she'd been making of herself, Grace does her best to apologize and the two quickly move on from this bit of forced drama. Quickly enough that it feels like Grace got forgiven way too easily. But I was just happy to be done with this and have Grace be more than a giant ball of anger. And she does steadily even back out to being a sympathetic character again. Around this time, we also start to get hints that Grace has her own connection to the supernatural, as she begins to dream of wolves chasing her in the dead of day for night, and of being saved by Ludwig II, only for him to turn into a wolf as well.
Alan.
Thing is, she had no idea that Ludwig was prone to midnight sleigh rides until she visits his museum later that day. With some aid from the Ed and Lorraine Warren stand-ins who arrive in town, it begins to seem like someone or something is trying to guide Grace into uncovering the truth behind the Black Wolf. Which means when you think about it, the fake Warrens did more to genuinely help someone than the real ones ever did anywhere.
Shots fired!
The fake ones were also funnier.
Good, how are you? Is this the castle of the Schattenjägers here?
Yes, but
How exciting!
Spoilers from here on out. If you don't want the answers of The Beast Within revealed to you, then skip ahead to my conclusion here. In the course of investigating the hunting club, all of the clues Gabriel finds leads to one clear suspect. Baron von Zell. Yeah, I know. I figured it would be von Glauer too. I mean, von Zell acts so blatantly evil that he had to be a red herring, while von Glauer has so much more screen time as well as this whole primitivist philosophy built around getting in touch with man's primal nature. But between other club members talking about von Zell's sudden shift in personality, him randomly inviting the head of the Munich Zoo to join the hunting club shortly before the two wolves that the police have been blaming for the recent mutilation killings escaped, the direct connection he had to the latest victim, whose body was barely a block away from the club, and then finally, the fact that said dead man paid a scumbag exotic animal dealer to smuggle the two aforementioned wolves out of the country. Yeah, it's not hard to put the pieces together. And wouldn't you know it, The hunting club just so happens to be going on their monthly hunting trip. The perfect chance to be alone with the murderer and probable werewolf to 100% prove that he did it. Gabriel, this is a terrible idea. Eager to prove me right, it doesn't take very long after arriving at the club's fancy pants hunting lodge for Gabriel to stumble upon Von Zell's lair. Okay, that was a perfectly understandable response to a sight like that. Maybe not the response a Schattenjäger should have, but Gabriel didn't exactly get formal training in this. Seriously though, this scene caught me off guard with how hard it goes. You can hear the gnawing immediately upon entering this screen, but I was expecting a brief flash of a werewolf with some nondescript flesh in its mouth. Not Von Zell buck naked, covered in blood, and helping himself to some leftovers.
Good times together seem to go even better when you bring home the great taste of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
I didn't think too much of Richard Rainsford's performance as Von Zell otherwise, but damn does he sell how fucking unhinged Von Zell is in this moment. I'm stoked to see what they came up with for the look of the werewolves.
You'll be sorry!
Huh. Wonder what he meant by that. Racing back to the lodge in a panic, Gabriel confesses everything that he saw to Von Glauer, who is taking the reveal that his friend is a brutal serial killer pretty well, all things considered.
I knew Von Zell was deeply disturbed, but this is incredible.
Yeah, but it's true. We have to call the police. I know the man in charge of the case.
No! The police would never believe us. Nothing in their mentality prepares them for something like this. Besides, I am responsible for Von Zell.
I knew that philosophy was powerful, but
I never realized that someone could take it to such a hideous conclusion.
Leaving the rest of the club in the dark about what's happening, the pair wait until nightfall before beginning their pursuit. Odd choice to give the werewolf the sight advantage, but I'm not the guy who has his buddy ship in exotic and endangered animals to hunt so he can stay close to home. Even if the others in the club aren't werewolves, they're still pieces of shit. But who cares? We've got a werewolf to see at long last. Is it too late to just have Richard Rainsford run around in a fursuit? Nearly 29 years too late, you say? Well, shit. I hate it when a story has the werewolf just be a bigger wolf. I'm aware that this is closer to some of their depictions in European folklore, and normal wolves are intimidating and all, but there's nothing supernaturally scary about a wolf of larger than average size. Not that it didn't still rip Gabriel to shreds a few times before I finally figured out how to corner it.
To shreds, you say? Well, how is his wife holding up? To shreds, you say?
Once you do so, Von Glauer shows up to finish the monster off. Like I was saying, Gabriel takes the shot, and Von Zell dies in a hilariously lame animation.
What a huge action sequence!
But not before taking a chunk out of Gabriel's leg. Good thing that he's already killed the only werewolf, or that could have gone poorly. Wait, what was with all that foreshadowing about the black wolf when Von Zell didn't have black fur as a wolf? Why did he have 2 wolves taken from the zoo to cover for his murders? Why was Von Glauer so easily accepting of the idea that his friend might be a werewolf? How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Crap, I think Von Glauer might be the alpha.
An alpha werewolf cannot harm the victims of his own hand.
So, Gabriel's turning into a werewolf, and it's canon here that this is a transformation that quite literally endangers your soul if you give in to the hunger. The only way to lift the curse now is for Grace to figure out a way to trap and kill Von Glauer before it's too late. In classic adventure game fashion, this involves tracking down Richard Wagner's Lost Opera and putting on a production of said opera according to Ludwig II's plans for his own production that is designed to forcibly induce a werewolf transformation. This amazing sentence was brought to you by Adventure Games. Adventure Games. Can we get a mainstream revival already?
So,
Tell me about Loon.
You mean the latest masterpiece of fantasy storytelling from Lucasfilm's Brian Moriarty?
And as for Von Glauer's part in all of this, he explains in a letter to Gabriel that he never intended for Gabriel to be infected this way, but that he hopes our hero will accept his fate and join him as a werewolf. Additionally, he was disgusted by Von Zell's savagery and was eager for a way to put him out of Von Glauer's misery, but their bond as Alpha and Beta prevented it. Yet in spite of his previous Beta's total lack of control, Von Glauer remains convinced that it's possible for the curse to be controlled and believes that Gabriel is his best hope to be freed from the centuries of loneliness that he's experienced. For a moment, you almost feel bad for Von Glauer. Then you remember what he put Ludwig II and certainly many others through, that his hunting club imports exotic and endangered animals for many of their hunts, and the fact that Von Glauer is still a remorseless killer himself whose only issue with Von Zell's crimes were in their lack of restraint.
People getting slaughtered. Children. In broad daylight. Nature can seem cruel, but it is orderly. It does not waste or torture. Not like this.
Von Zell's shift in temperament is noted to be a recent development, and yet Gabriel learns that there have been hundreds of missing persons cases in and around Bavaria's forests ever since Von Glauer arrived in Munich in 1970.
Between 1960 and 1969, there were only 1 to 2 cases a year in the Bavarian National Forest area. Between 1970 and 1990, there were 10 to 12 cases each year. Oh. In 1991, it went up to 17, then went back down to 12 in 92 and 93. The Schwäbisch-Fränkischer Waldfickers are similar.
Curious.
If anything, Von Glauer is a more insidious killer than Von Zell could have ever hoped to be. 2 months later, man, this is a slow-ass transformation process, Grace has everything ready to go with the opera. Von Glauer will be seated in the VIP box right next to Kommissar Leber, while Gabriel will be safely locked in the prop room away from any potential danger, and all of the crystal chandeliers needed to funnel the full force of the opera towards Von Glauer are right where they need to.
These measurements are not the same as today. Now, if we make the chandeliers the same distance from each other, just as marked, but the distance from chandeliers to the walls, no, not the same.
Why aren't the measurements the same? This is the Wittelsbacher Theater, isn't it?
Yeah, but not the same Wittelsbacher Theater. The bombs hit the first one. This one is very close, but smaller.
But everything looks so old.
Oh, they take the art and the wood and save it. Remake theater later, after the war.
Of course. Of course. How could I be so stupid? I'm a history major.
Well, I'm sure Gabriel will understand. Mistakes happen and...
I can't believe you did this. God damn you, Gracie! You did it on purpose, didn't you?
Gabriel!
Open the door! Open the goddamn door!
No.
You open the door this minute. If you can't manage a simple goddamn fucking diagram, I'll take care of things myself!
Okay, really? You're really telling me that this guy couldn't get work after this game?
It's nice to be a hero any way I can get it, so, graphics or otherwise.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half.
With the werewolf curse seriously affecting his judgment at this point, and because this is his series, Gabriel decides to take matters into his own hands and take the lead's place in the opera for the climactic scene in order to... I'm not sure, actually. What was the plan here, Gabe? Typically, I'd call the protagonist doing something this moronic, bad writing, but when it's a guy steadily turning into a werewolf who's acting like an impulsive idiot because of the transformation, it actually works. Once the opera reaches its crescendo, it'll be time for the final confrontation with Von Glauer. Any minute now.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Look, I admire the amount of effort it must have taken to stage an entire opera scene, but this is killing the pacing.
5 minutes later.
About damn time. Ugh, this bit. You have to race through the basement to cut off Von Glauer's escape routes by shutting the doors, conveniently held open by floor weights a canine can push, in order to force Von Glauer towards the boiler room. Where, despite my hopes, mankind isn't there to slay the beast for me.
And the only hope
is mankind's love for humanity, and I assure you, I have none! The basic goal of this is understandable, but I've never been good at puzzles like this. Thus, I wound up getting mauled by a cornered von Glauer or shot by labor a dozen or so times before I got it right. And then I had to repeat it another time because I screwed up the timing on knocking von Glauer into the furnace. The scene that plays when you miss is hilarious, though. A few more college tries later, and I at last figured out that I needed to click on von Glauer before he reached the furnace. As he has zero clue what in the hell is going on, Labor goes to shoot the wolf not currently burning to death, but is stopped just in time by Grace. Meanwhile, von Glauer goes out like a low-budget boss by staring daggers at Grace and Labor as the last of his life burns to ash. I can only imagine how confused poor Labor is at this point. Guy thought he was going for a nice night at the opera and wound up learning werewolves are real.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
With von Glauer dead and gone, Gabriel's curse is lifted, his soul is saved, and he's learned that he's probably bi.
Beef is gross, unethical, and yucky.
They won't stop testing you, you know.
It'll get easier, though. Don't you think, Gracie? Don't you think?
The Beast Within, a Gabriel Knight mystery, definitely lives up to its reputation as one of the finest FMV games ever made. Which might sound like I'm damning it with faint praise, but no. The Beast Within is a great adventure game with a compelling, well-acted story. So well-acted, in fact, that it kind of pisses me off that many of these actors rarely, if ever, got major roles after this game. Nicholas Worth perhaps had the best luck out of all of them before his unfortunate passing in 2007, with a few appearances on The X-Files and Star Trek Voyager, as well as multiple Command & Conquer games. So even without Tim Curry, Gabriel Knight has a direct connection to Red Alert.
This is my advisor, Yuri. He will help make this possible.
However, if I were to compare The Beast Within directly to its predecessor, I feel that it's a slight step down. Sins of the Fathers is one of the all-time greats, though, so that still keeps The Beast Within in the top flight of adventure games in my mind. But I can't shake the feeling that it was within a hair's breadth of being a once-in-a-generation kind of game. For one, the quality performances of the actors can't entirely cover for the mediocre cinematography and ridiculous werewolf effects. It may be one of the best FMV games, but making it one in the first place was a mistake. I have no doubt that you could take the audio from this game and put it over good pixel art or even 2D animation a la Broken Sword, and you'd improve the presentation tenfold. 2, the point that will probably provoke some ire, it's not gay enough. Let's stop for a moment and consider how we think things would have played out were Gabriel instead Gabriella. Whatever movie or TV show that just popped in your head, yes, that's almost certainly in the ballpark of how I think it should have gone here. But instead, we're left with Anne Rice vampire-style longing gazes and subtext when there aren't any damn vampires in this series until the 3rd game. I understand why Jane Jensen and her team didn't pull the rainbow trigger here, though. We still deal with people losing their damn minds over non-optional gay content in games. I can only imagine how bad the reaction would have been in 1995. Now that I've kicked the hornet's nest by daring to express an opinion on the internet that isn't purely about the game this video is on, let's talk where you can buy The Beast Within. You are going to get it, right? It's only a slight step down from one of the best adventure games I've ever played. The Beast Within is absolutely worth your time and money. Particularly when you can buy it for $6 on GOG or Steam when it's not on sale. And it frequently is! It even comes bundled with the Gabriel Knight 2K project, which scales it for widescreen monitors while keeping it in the proper 4:3 aspect ratio. So get out there and experience it for yourself, you crazy kids! And in the meantime, I'm heading back down to Deadside for Shadow Man 2 Ekin coming.
Deadside. No place like home.
I'll see you then.
Don't like the looks of this cave.
You think it's dangerous?
No, just tacky.